just want to talk about professional development. So,
Mhm.
so in these times of COVID and lockdown, what's your suggestion on doing good professional development, Ben? What do you suggest people do?
Well, mate, I did some research this morning, so I put my thoughts down on paper so I could actually be a little bit collated with what I'm presenting. So
Good on you.
I went through 4 key steps. So I went for choosing PD to complete. So what process should you go through, and what do you want to do for PD?
Yep.
Professional development being PD. How do you want to complete it? So the options available to you.
Mm-hmm.
How you can do that self-directed professional development. So how can you achieve it yourself to try and get yourself targeted down the path you want to go? And finally, one of the key ones I teach our guys here is teaching yourself to teach yourself. So to me, that's a skill in itself, is how do you, not every PD has to be a course. It could be you teaching yourself by going down a bit of a learning pathway yourself without going through a structured delivery.
Right. So what's that first step about?
So choosing your PD to complete. So that was the first one. So my first topic was making sure it's relevant. So now this isn't just, so I'm probably going to talk a little bit about business relevancy today, but this could be personal, professional development as well, because obviously we're moving into quite a unknown future for a lot of businesses. So what does it look like? A lot of us are transferring over to technology-based systems now. So we're now looking more at tech. So a lot of our guys have had to really upskill very quickly in video conferencing techniques, in development of documents in digital platforms, sharing documents where they probably never had to do it themselves too much. They relied on someone more IT savvy like myself to do it. They're now learning these techniques themselves. So what is relevant to you moving forward, I guess, is one of the key things there. The next one is checking how reputable that training is. So if you are going to do a formal structured delivery, what does that look like? So don't just go to the first free course that pops up on Facebook. Like there's probably going to be a heap of free MBAs being thrown at you at the moment, but it might be worthwhile looking at, Jim's MBA Academy is probably not the best place to go and get your MBA. Not anything against him, but I just do a little bit of background checking first before I selected that as the program I might want to undertake. See what his check government regulators, make sure that he hasn't got anything against him or against that company, and just seeing if that it is a legit course that is actually going to be recognised by people out there in the field. And even the smaller courses. The reason I'm probably mentioning smaller ones is I know I don't know if everywhere is doing this, but I know in Australia there's at least a couple of states where the local TAFEs have put up quite a few free micro credentials. So they're that really tiny skills, like it might be cyber security, or it might be something on just fixing up your resume, something like that. So they're really small courses, but they're really trying to help in this sort of pandemic situation that we've got at the moment. One thing I will mention to people, and one I'd really push to people to have a look at, there is a really good one called code.org. Now it is built around computer coding, but it's all in sort of a teaching you how to solve problems way. So that's one I'd really push people towards, because moving forwards in the IT world, your ability to understand how computers operate and stuff like that could be a real perk to especially people in manufacturing, stuff like that. That's where I can see those sort of things heading. So yeah, just doing some of that sort of PDs would be a really good idea.
Great advice.
Now, how do you want to complete your PD? So there's a few options here. You can go with a fully online option via a website. So that's what the majority of providers traditionally have always had. Now there's a lot of shift in this at the moment, but traditionally we've always had the guys that are just doing, and we're probably guilty of this a little bit as well in our organization. We'll put up a website with all of the content on it. There might be videos, there'll be some resources for you to read, and then there'll be some quizzes and assignments. That is one delivery mechanism. But what we know from our trainers side of things, our student side of things, that flexibility is fantastic as long as you can be regimented yourself in yourself enough to actually complete that stuff. We find that if we left our students to their own devices, probably only about 20% would be able to get through purely with no input from us. So we need to help out that other 80%, and that's where you're probably looking at the second delivery mechanism, which is your virtual classroom meeting type delivery. So you've got all your online content like the first one, but then you've got some sort of connected delivery with a trainer. And that trainer is either like we're doing now, or it's going to be via a one-on-one session, phone call, anything. As long as there is some contact and guidance with a trainer, we find that really has ramped up our completion to 80% plus. But we have particular programs in place to make sure we have that contact. So that's one I'd push people towards, making sure there's that contact with that expert that is there to help you along your way. Now, a couple of things to be wary of, and this has actually happened yesterday. I got a phone call on this. A company was offered an online chainsaw course.
Wow, that's impressive.
Fully online, apparently. And
wow.
So we got a call from a mate of ours who's one of his subsidiary officers actually was the one looking at doing the, well, they weren't looking at doing the course, they had the offer, and they rang him and said, what do you reckon about this? And he rang us, and basically, when we found out the details, the guy delivers the training virtually, but then he actually says to them, off you go and do some practice yourself now. So there's no supervision of the practical aspect. And I looked at that and went, think about the health and safety is still a core part of what's going on now. So there is no way in hell that I would let one of our guys go out and do a practical chainsaw without someone standing there watching them do it. That's just insane. I just couldn't believe that.
Wow.
And
yeah, watch out for that.
so
Wow.
I guess it's making sure you pick and choose the right ones as well, and make sure you're not going to pick something that's going to hurt someone. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So just something to keep in mind. Now, self-directed professional development. Okay, so this is probably in line with how I go about. It's probably combined with the final point, teaching yourself to teach yourself. So not everything you want to learn is going to be a course. So there may not be a course in the exact thing you want to learn. And I've got a good example of this. I had to do some emergency plans for a company. Now, my background isn't in health and safety by default. I've got some experience there, but I needed to go and find the information myself and actually teach myself about that topic. So I went through a bit of a process for teaching myself about a particular thing that I couldn't find a course that suited me. And what I did was went to trusty old Google, like we always do. But that's just my first stop. I go there, find Google, find a list of sources that I can use to kind of give myself some base information. I then start looking at where that information's come from, and I start rating that information sources on a bit of a scale for myself on how credible is that provider. So if it's a regulator for my local government, then I'll give it some pretty high credibility that it's the correct information I should be reading. If again, it's just emergencyplans.com, I might look at it and go, right, they probably do emergency plans, but I might want to go and cross-reference their information with someone else's to ensure that it's not just them trying to sell their wares or something like that. So it's always looking for that. So if you're looking at the standards, it's making sure you go back to the standards and not just believe ISO 9001.org or something like that. You're always just going to check on your different ones.
And then you're looking for verification, are you, to say that data is, well, what they're going to deliver is spot on. So
Yep, and that's what I always. So this, and then the next step would be collating the information. Now you've got your valid resources. You collate your information and go, which ones were talking about the same stuff, especially based on that credibility. And if that credibility was good, and then this other side over here is saying the same thing as the good credible site, then more than likely their information is something I can trust and follow along. I still want to try and get other sources to back it up, so I've got that cross-referencing, but that's how I then move forwards. And from there, the learning really happens when I build resources. So this might be building a checklist, or it might be building a ready reckoner for someone else in the organization to follow. And we do this in training all the time. We actually say the best way to learn is to teach someone else. It might be jumping onto a video call, and I've been doing a lot of this recently, teaching people how to use Zoom meetings and GoToMeetings and everything else. Teaching people the platform is the best way to learn the platform yourself. This works for anything across the board. So like emergency plans, I built myself a checklist that goes through the standard, the regulations and everything else. And that's how I taught myself. So I can almost be able to just say anything off the cuff about emergency plans. And if I don't remember it, I can go back to my little checklist and all my content's there, and I know I can trust it as a good source. So that's what I always say is that's how I teach myself a new topic. And I seem to hit that all the time where I have to teach myself. So yeah, that was my key points that I was going to go through, mate.
Yes, I like that last one, teaching yourself to teach yourself. That's a great suggestion.
It's a skill we see is missing in a lot of our trainees. They rely so much on us to present them with the information they sometimes forget that you can go and look it up yourself as well.
Yeah,
It's one of those things, especially
Have you,
in your space. Yep.
exactly. Yeah. Have you seen an uptick in during this pandemic of professional development, people reaching out and asking for more professional development, or is it just
Yeah,
sort of people are sort of hunkered down waiting for the lockdown to open up?
we're getting a bit of both at the at the start of it. It was a bit of a panic station where no one knew, especially from a financial point of view, what was going to be
Mm,
happening. So the PD side wasn't too critical for them at that point. Now and I know our government's done a great job of providing some surety there with payments coming out and job keepers and job seekers and
mm-hmm.
all these new payments they're putting out there, which has really put some surety back into people. And literally, as of this week, we are fully booked with training. So we had
Wow.
about probably 6 weeks of cancelled, or I shouldn't say cancelled, postponed courses to later when we knew what dates would be suitable. But as of this week, we've got an online delivery in the room next door, and that's up into Indigenous communities up in the Cape who are completely cut off from everyone. There is no travel in and out of those locations.
Mm-hmm.
We've got a Working at Heights course at the other end of the building. Now that is being delivered in-house,
Mm-hmm.
obviously taking into account all of the social distancing requirements and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
But we're actually finding tomorrow and the next day we have 2 more practical courses for working around asbestos. So those are still cracking on. So the training wise, in certain industries, I believe, has really continued on. The
Right.
industries that can keep operating have continued on.
Right.
We've had an increase in people wanting to do the online only Cert 4 on work health and safety.
Mm-hmm.
But again, this is probably tempering what I was saying before. Some of these people wouldn't necessarily be the most suitable for an online only attempt.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah. Yeah.
probably just looking at doing something. And a couple of them we've spoken to and said, look, it'd be better if you wait until you can come to a class, because when you look at their LLN skills and everything else, jumping from no qual to straight up to a Cert 4, that's quite a jump for people to undertake. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Excellent. Okay. Well, thanks, Ben. That's really great. That's
That's all
fantastic
right.
advice. Thanks for your
Mm-hmm.
time. I much appreciate it, and
That's all right, mate.
enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks again for your time.